ऐगिरि नन्दिनि नन्दितमेदिनि विश्वविनोदिनि नन्दिनुते गिरिवरविन्द्यशिरोदिनि वासिनि विष्णुविलासिनि जिष्णुनुते भगवति हेशिति कण्ठकुटुम्बिनि भूरि कुटुम्बिनि भूरि कृते जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुते सुरवरवर्षिणि दुर्धरदर्शिनि दुर्मुखमर्षिणि हर्षरते त्रिभुवनपोषिणि शङ्करतोषिणि किल्बिषमोषिणि घोषरते धनुजनिरोषिणि दिथिषुतरोषिणि दुर्मथतोषिणि सिन्धुषुते जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुते जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुते जय जय हे महिषासुरमर्दिनि रम्यकपर्दिनि शैलसुते
Hi guys, thank you for joining the live stream. Let me know if the audio is coming fine and stuff. So a lot of my old viewers who have been following my channel near the beginning, or at least let's say more than a year or so, know what the core essence of my channel is, which is that anytime I have a holy shit kind of a moment reading a book, and I feel like sharing it with people. That's why the channel was created in the first place, because of reading Sanjeev Sanyal and Sitaram Goel. Today I have had such a moment again. I was gifted this book by a close person, a legendary book called The Religion of India, The Sociology of Hinduism and Buddhism by Max Weber, who was basically the first person to come up with the idea that castes are nothing but status groups which are existent all across the world. So I did become a bit skeptical of Max Weber for a while after reading in the Dr. Kaushik Gangopadhyay book that S.N. Balagangadhara has said that he is apparently a harsh or a hostile critic of Hindu religion. Now, then of course I asked that question to mysterious sociologist last day. Do you all remember, right? So he gave a defense. Now today this book arrived, and I read about, let's say, how many pages did I read? Just about 4 or 5 pages, okay. And I have been absolutely blown away. My mind is absolutely on fire at the moment because of a number of things. One is a legendary persona, a legendary scholar, a legendary, let's say, even sociologist like Max Weber has been basically hidden away from us, okay. The stuff he says here would be it made me think, like it gave me the reminiscence of the time I first read Land of Seven Rivers by Sanjeev Sanyal, okay. Just the way Land of Seven Rivers by Sanjeev Sanyal turned me into half a Hindutvadi on the first go because of his book. If I had read this book by The Religion of India, the first 5-6 pages, I would have been convinced in the same way by this book as well, okay. And what's interesting is, then why has even these things been hidden from us? The kind of things he says, that India was great, etc., on countless kinds of occasions, on countless contexts, realms, etc. Then why haven't we been taught about Max Weber? Okay, so if these things are said by Sanjeev Sanyal, they will say that, oh, he's some finance economics guy. What does he know about history? If it's written by a historian, they will say, no, but you are a Hindu fascist historian. Now, if it's written by Max Weber, then it's hidden, and the people whom they otherwise love, the always, let's say, European white guy who has a neutral perspective on India and Hinduism, only they are to be trusted. There, a guy like Max Weber says good things about India, and then even he disappears of the face of, let's say, the academic earth. Now, there are things which will piss off a certain section of Hindutvadi. This is not a trad versus Raita thing. This is a well-meaning, innocent Hindutvadi versus the stark, realist Hindutvadi conversation that I'm talking about, okay? Because you'll see what I'm talking about when I get into some things, okay? And some things it does get factually wrong, of course, because this book is written in 1916, okay? Sola, 1916, the data of those days, British data and stuff, and the insane translations of Sanskrit. He's writing based on that. Even then, notice the things he comes up with, which is why I've put up Sanjeev Sanyal on the thumbnail, okay? If I read these 4 or 5 pages to you, you will think this is written by a Hindutvadi propagandist. Nothing more, nothing less, okay? Insane things. My mind is absolutely blown away. So this is how the book looks. Pretty nice looking book. Lots of spelling mistakes. It's published by a Indian publisher. So there's a basic prefatory note. It says Max Weber's early 20th century study of the religions and civilization of India is a great pioneering adventure in the sociology of ancient India. Weber's insight and analysis, especially his application of the sociological perspective to the work of classical Indologists and the religious texts available to him, this is a qualifier, okay, were to add much to the store of the social scientist. Later, historians and archaeologists were to confirm a surprising number of Weber's theories. The central concern of this and other of Weber's studies of countries we today describe as quote-unquote developing was with the obstacles to industrialization and modernization. That why aren't these countries being able to industrialize and modernize? Weber anticipated by several decades a problem that has come to occupy the post-World War II world. Why had these countries failed to display the full consequences of those rationalizing tendencies which to Weber's mind had so powerful an affinity with the scientific technical transformation of the West? He isolated religious institutions and the key social strata which mediate them to the wider society as crucial for the original formation of social psychological orientations to the practical concerns of life, and hence for receptivity or resistance. It may be both. It may be receptivity or resistance to industrialization, but we'll get into what is it about Indian society that is reacting to modernization, industrialization, in what ways, okay? Now, I might be proven wrong by the end of the book, okay, obviously, but at least based on the first 4 or 5 pages, I'm wondering that he has already said that he has not explicitly said that, see, Hinduism is a bad religion or this is causing this bad problem, etc. But he has pointed out some flaws in the society which he thinks is happening because of the so-called religion called Hinduism. But he's parallelly going on saying that Indian society was absolutely fantastic. Now, my problem is he coming from a Christian epistemological upbringing surrounding education, he might not know that there is no difference between Hinduism and Indian society. Okay, but people like S.N. Balagangadhara who know there is no difference, why are they being harshly critical of Max Weber? Maybe I'll find out by the end of the book. But now get ready to have your mind blown, okay? Let me check some comments. Taka dibi amake? Yes. Okay. So the first chapter, let me tell you the chapter names, okay? Part 1 is called the Hindu social system. Chapter 1 is India and Hinduism. Chapter 2 is the main grouping of the castes. Chapter 3 is caste forms and schisms. Part 2 is orthodox and heterodox holy teaching of the Indian intellectuals. Chapter 5 is orthodox Hinduism. Chapter 6 is the heterodox storiologies of the cultured professional monks. Part 3 is the Asiatic sects and the redemption religions. Chapter 7 is the transformation of ancient Buddhism. Chapter 8 is the missions. Chapter 9 is the orthodox restoration in India. Chapter 10 is the general character of Asiatic religion. Okay. Chapter 1, India and Hinduism. I'm going to be online for about 1.5 hours. I'll read as much as I can, okay? Fabulous things. The general place of Hinduism. This is the first chapter. The first subchapter in the first chapter. India, in contrast to China, has been and remains a land of villages and of the most inviolable organization by birth. But at the same time, it was a land of trade, foreign, particularly with the Occident, as well as domestic. Trade and credit usury appeared in India from ancient Babylonian times, which is something I found out from Sanjeev Sanyal's book. In the Northwest, Indian commerce was under constant perceptible Hellenic influence, meaning the Greek. At an early period, the Jews settled in the south. See, these are the things that today's Hindutvadis say. Zoroastrians from Persia immigrated to the northwest, constituting a stratum wholly devoted to whole-scale trade. Immigrated, okay? I found out this about 2-3 years back. Into this situation came the influence of Islam and the rationalistic enlightenment of the great Mughal Akbar. This will of course piss off Hindutvadis, but of course back then who knew what? Now, this is a pattern that you'll repeatedly see. On one line, he pisses off Hindutvadis. On one line, he pisses off commies. So I guess both of these groups have completely ignored Weber. Under the great Mughals, and also repeatedly before them, all or almost all of India for generations was formed into one political unit. Ye kya bol diya? He's saying even before the Mughals, India for generations was formed into one political unit. Such periods of unity were interrupted, however, by long periods of disintegration, with the country divided into numerous constantly warring political dominions. तो कभी ना कभी वन पॉलिटिकल यूनिट बनता था, कभी ना कभी फिर से थोड़ा डिइंडस्ट्रियलाइजेशन हो जाता था. लाइक strong men create good times create weak men create bad times. That kind of a thing used to happen. Princely methods of warfare, politics, and finance were rationalized, made subject to literary and, in the case of politics, even quite Machiavellian theorizing. Okay, what was given Machiavellian theorizing? Warfare, politics, and finance. He's talking about the Arthashastra, obviously. Knightly combat and the disciplined army equipped by the prince appeared. While, as is occasionally maintained, use of artillery did not develop here for the first time, it appeared early. State creditors, tax farming, state contracting, trade and communication monopolies, etc., developed in the fashion characteristic of Occidental patrimonial logic. For centuries, so he's saying that it was the same as in the West. For centuries, urban development in India paralleled that of the Occident at many points. So he's saying India has had the same history, kind of. Or at least, if not, let's say, we now know today that from the time when India has had these kinds of development, in those eras, even the Occident was not that developed. But he's at least talking about when Occident was developed. At that time, even India was developed. But that's not something we have been told. The contemporary rational number system, the technical basis of all quote-unquote calculability, is of Indian origin. The quote-unquote positional number system has existed undetermined time. The zero was invented and used sometime after the 5th or 6th century AD. Arithmetic and algebra are considered to have been independently developed in India. For negative magnitudes, the term debts or kshaya, okay, in Bengali we pronounce it as khoy, was used. In contrast to the Chinese, the Indians cultivated rational science, including mathematics and grammar. They developed numerous philosophic schools and religious sects of almost all possible sociological types. For the most part, the schools and sects developed out of the basic need for rational consistency, which was expressed in most varied spheres of life. This is exactly what Kaushik Gangopadhyay was saying yesterday, that this is what Hinduism is basically. For long periods, tolerance towards religious and philosophic doctrines was almost absolute. At least it was infinitely greater than anywhere in the Occident until most recent times. What does this sound like, guys? Does this sound like anything other than a Hindutva fascist propagandist writing a book? Indian justice developed numerous forms which could have served capitalistic purposes as easily and well as corresponding institutions in our own medieval law. The autonomy of the merchant stratum in lawmaking was at least equivalent to that of our own medieval merchants. He's talking about the Vaishya Varna, I guess, right? Indian handicrafts and occupational specialization were highly developed. From the standpoint of possible capitalistic development, the acquisitiveness of Indians of all strata left nothing to be desired. So he's saying that it was all enough. Okay. And nowhere is it to be found so little anti-chromatism. Okay. What is anti-chromatism? Anti-chromatism means the kind of the social norm of looking at wealth with respectful eyes. Okay. Dharma se moolam artha. Arth to kamana hi hai. Earning money is not a bad thing. Okay. That is called chromatism. Okay. The opposite of that would be anti-chromatism. So he is saying इतना little anti-chromatism ऐसा और पूरे दुनिया में कहीं नहीं था. Can you believe this? And such high evaluation of wealth, okay, such high evaluation of wealth, so little anti-chromatism is nowhere else to be found, was nowhere else to be found. Yet, modern capitalism did not develop indigenously before or during the English rule. It was taken over as a finished artifact without autonomous beginnings. So you see, this is actually a very important point that our capitalism, when it did begin, it began with autonomous beginnings, which is why one or two companies had billionaires forever from the time of independence, or not billionaires, at least millionaires in those days, and they were in cahoots with the ruling dispensation, and both of them colluded and made sure that no one else gets into that nice millionaire club. Here we shall inquire as to the manner in which Indian religion, as one factor among many, may have prevented capitalistic development in the Occidental sense. See, this is what a fair scholar does. He's being fair with every sentence, every proposition. Okay. Firstly, he's saying we shall inquire the manner in which Indian religion, as maybe just one factor among many factors, which may have prevented capitalism. But he's also mentioning capitalistic development in the Occidental sense. Okay. The national form of Indian religion is Hinduism. The term Hindu was first used under the foreign domination of the Mohammedans to mean unconverted native Indians. Only in recent literature have the Indians themselves begun to designate their religious affiliation as Hinduism. It is official designation of the English census for the religious complex, also described in Germany as Brahmanism. The term Brahmanism refers to the fact that a definite type of priest, the Brahman, was the leader of the religion. It is known that the Brahmins constituted a caste, and that in general, the institution of the caste, a system of particularly rigid and exclusive hereditary estates, played and continued to play a role in the social life of India. Also, the names of the four main castes of classical Indian learning, as represented in the laws of Manu, are known as Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudras. The general public is quite unfamiliar with the details of the castes. A very important point. Okay. That it's not like everyone is consciously following and has total education on the Manusmriti or something. The general public is quite unfamiliar with the details of the castes, with the possible exception of vague ideas about the transmigration of souls. Okay, कि आत्मा मरने के बाद यहाँ जाती है, वहाँ जाती है, etc. These ideas are not false. They merely require clarification in terms of the abundant sources and literature. Under the heading Religion, the tables of the Census of India for 1911 list, in round numbers, 217.5 million people as Hindus, that is 69.39% of the population. Among the imported faiths, he's saying imported faiths. Among the imported faiths, there are Musliman, 66 to 2 by 3rd million, or 21.26%. Christians, Jews, Zoroastrians, and animists, meaning tribals, I guess, 10.29 million, or 3.28%. The following non-Hindu religions are listed as native to India: Sikhs around 3 million, or 0.86%, Jains 1.2 million, or 0.4%, Buddhists 10.7 million, or 3.42%. However, all but a third of a million of the Buddhists reside in Burma, which since early times was almost 9/10 Buddhistic. The remainder live in the bordering territories of Tibet, hence not on classically Indian but Mongolian territory, partly in outlying Indian territories, partly in Central Asia. So, to be sure, now he's making a clarification again because he's a fair scholar, not a nut job. To be sure, the census figures by decades cannot be compared without reservations. The percentage of Hindus since 1881 decreased from 74.32% to 69.39%. Islam rose about 19.74% to 21.22%. Christians from 0.73% to 1.24%. And finally, animists, meaning tribals, from 2.59% to 3.28%. This last figure, and also part of the percentage shifts, rests not only upon the considerable numbers of children of the uncultured animistic tribes, but to a large extent upon differences in census enumeration. A further small part of the proportional decrease of Hindus is to be accounted for by the extension of the census to Burma. So they were counting Burma, that is why so many Buddhists have been counted, which resulted in a considerable increase in counted Buddhists. For the rest, the relative decline of the Hindu is partially to be attributed to differential birth and mortality rates. The relatively low social status and correspondingly low standard of living of the Hindu masses has to some extent, religious causes. A fair argument that it does have religious causes, but it's only to some extent. Child marriage, female infanticide, the prohibition of the remarriage of widows led to the reduction in the number of children and the high mortality of women of the upper castes. Nutritional difficulties due to food taboos during a bad harvest have been important among the lower strata. Another small part of the decrease of Hindus is to be ascribed to single conversions to Islam and Christianity. Single conversions, meaning one-way conversions to Islamism and Christianity, the converts being mainly from the lower castes for the betterment of their social situation. Formal conversions to Hinduism do not officially exist. According to the theory of Hinduism, they are impossible. This leads us forthwith to a consideration of important peculiarities of Hinduism. Okay, he is saying these things as what is said so far, and then he will get into how true are these claims. Okay, this leads us forthwith with a consideration of important peculiarities of Hinduism. Okay, a sect, quote unquote sect, in the sociological sense of the word, is an exclusive association of religious virtuosos or of especially qualified religious persons recruited through individual admission after establishment of qualification. Okay, by contrast, a church, as a universalistic establishment for the salvation of the masses, raises the claim, like the state, quote unquote state, that everyone, at least each child of a member, must belong by birth. Now, this is very important because he's saying that therefore the state, the model of a state, the nation state, okay, a central government, okay, all empowering, all encompassing, that is essentially the equivalent of a church. Hence, a nation state, one constitution running the country, okay, one central government, centralized government. That's basically a Christian idea. That's what he is indirectly admitting here. By contrast, a church, as a universalistic establishment for the salvation of the masses, raises a claim, like the state, that everyone, at least each child of a member, must belong by birth. It demands sacramental acts and possibly proof of acquaintance with its holy learning as a precondition of its membership rights in Christianity and nation state model, right? But establishes as a duty the observance of the sacraments and the discharge of those obligations, which are a condition of active membership rights. The consequence of this is that when the church reaches its full development and has power, it coerces opponents to conform according to the principle causa intra re. Then the atrocities begin. Okay, the individual is normally, quote unquote, born into the church. Single conversions and admissions occurring only until the time the church has attained its principal goal, the unification of all men in the universal church. Hinduism has some of the properties of a church conjoined to sect-like exclusiveness. One belongs to a strictly birth religion like Hinduism merely by being born to Hindu parents. However, Hinduism is, quote unquote, exclusive in the sense that in no other way can the individual enter its community, at least the circle of those considered fully qualified religiously. Okay, in the circle of those who are considered to be fully qualified religiously, you can't enter the circle of those, at least. He's talking about, of course, before the days of popularity of ISKCON. Hinduism does not wish to encompass mankind. Hinduism does not wish to encompass mankind. No matter what his belief or way of life, anyone not born a Hindu remains an outsider, a barbarian to whom the sacred values of Hinduism are in principle denied. Now here, a commie might quote this a sentence from Weber and say that, see, even Weber has said that Hindus considered everyone else barbarian. But you see, Weber is not a Twitter, YouTube troll. He's not using words for shock value. He's using barbarian in the same sense as mleccha. Okay, it does not mean you go around killing mlecchas. You'll see in the next paragraph that it's what I'm saying is true. Okay. Nandi Shegre, he doesn't mention about conversion. Yeah, he did mention about conversion about 2-3 times. Like most generalizations about Hinduism, this is true only with qualifications. Okay, कुछ criteria, कुछ nuance में घुसना ही पड़ेगा. What a fair thing to say. What a fair scholar. He's saying like most generalizations about Hinduism, this is true only with qualifications, and this is something I realized on my own by reading and finding out so many non-left and leftist arguments that, okay, everyone seems to say sati happened. A lot of people say sati happened. Both sides have proof. There are incidents of casteism, bad behavior happening. There's incidents of people rising up against casteism, like Sri Purandara Dasaru. There are examples of caste not mattering. There are examples of so-called lower varnas or lower jatis becoming kings, etc. So nothing that you say about Hinduism or India is applicable forever and ever for the entirety of this landmass called South Asia. Okay, and he's saying exactly that, which we should have mentioned, which we should have known growing up. Okay, Saugad is saying, why doesn't Weber mention about Bhakti movement? Maybe he didn't know. And this is, or maybe he will get into it later on. Let's see. Like most generalizations about Hinduism, and was Bhakti movement a movement for converting non-Hindus to Hinduism? Like most generalizations about Hinduism, this is true only with qualifications. Quite apart from the sporadic relaxation of the exclusiveness of the upper caste. Okay, sporadic relaxation of the exclusiveness of the upper castes. So even he is saying that there were some relaxations of the exclusiveness of upper castes, as reported by the census. There were important processes in some of the lower castes. Now remember, these are the those infamous censuses, or I don't know what's the plural of census, that insane things were going on. People are saying that no one follows this caste and that caste. The bureaucrats are saying no, write down some caste. So even on the basis of that, Max Weber is saying there was sporadic relaxation of the exclusiveness of the upper castes. There were important processes in some of the lower castes. Some of these castes not only recruit excommunicated former members of other castes, but occasionally do so quite indiscriminately. That this is a proof of caste mobility again. For example, the impure caste of the Bhangi of Bombay province is partially made up of outcasts from higher castes. How does someone become a outcast in higher castes? Okay, if higher castes were always like having a free reign, I guess they married someone from a lower caste, or did gohatya, or went out of India, I guess, across the seas and stuff. However, the Bhangi of the United Provinces, meaning Uttar Pradesh, were recruited by admitting voluntary applicants. So, see already a difference between the Bhangis of Bombay versus the Bhangis of Uttar Pradesh. And hence were often identified, as Blunt does in the census report of 1911, with the Chandala, the lowest unclean caste of the ancient law books. Several other castes, in principle, allow individuals to affiliate. You can randomly just go and say, I'm from a different jati. A great number of outcasts belong to the Vaishnavas, a sect caste which to this day offers a haven to rebels against Brahmanical rule. Furthermore, imperfectly Hinduized tribes and tribal castes burdened with residues of tribal descent often receive individual affiliates. So they get individual affiliates, like one person from the group can become a member of this jati or varna, etc. Most lenient are the very low-ranking pariah tribes of mat and basket weavers. In general, the more completely Hinduized in the classical pattern, the more exclusive the caste. So the more orthodox you are, obviously. And genuinely old Hindu castes hold that individual affiliation with a caste is impossible. It has to be based on your entire group. Hence, Ketkar goes too far in constructing the facts above into the generalization that Hinduism, quote unquote, leaves it to the various castes whether or not to accept strangers, and that no caste can lay down the law for another. Okay. Now, interestingly, the last day's paper that we discussed by Declan Quigley, he was saying that Ketkar is actually right on these things. Maybe not right on this particular thing, but he was being appreciative of Ketkar. Formally, each caste formulates its own principles, but in a typical Hindu caste, the affiliating individual would forego all sibling ties or sib ties, not sibling ties. In fact, rules, prerequisites, and forms of individual recruitment are non existent. Where individual affiliation takes place, it is indicative of an absence rather than the existence of rules. Okay, if at all there is some individual affiliation with some new guy joining a caste, it means that no one created any rule for that particularly, or no one gave a shit about the rules. It was not like the rule said that yes you can induct the individual. In the systematic Hinduization of a region, at least according to ancient history, the Hinduized barbarians could Hinduize barbarians. So it does not mean barbarians. By barbarians, Hindus meant that they were all evil people who need to be ended. The Hinduized barbarians, so he means mlechas who converted to Hinduism, Hinduized mlechas. The Hinduized barbarians could at best join the lowliest unclean caste of Chandala. Occasionally, for instance, in the Manubhashya, I guess chapter 2, shloka 23, he just says Roman numerals 2 and then 23. The question is raised as to when a conquered barbarian territory becomes suitable for sacrifice. That is, when is it ritually pure? The answer given is that it is ritually pure only when the king establishes the 4 castes and reduces the barbarians to Chandala. Obviously, the other castes, including Shudra castes, can develop in a given place only by the immigration of Hindus of those castes. Okay. Vanamali Chakravarti maintains that the numerous Chandala, I guess this is a spelling mistake probably, or printing mistake, maybe it's Vanamali Chakravarti. Vanamali Chakravarti maintains that the numerous Chandala of the southeastern regions originated from such immigration. In any case, the barbarian must, as it were, work up from the ranks and can advance only by way of metempsychosis. This is not to say that the barbarian will always be considered socially inferior to the accepted impure caste. This is what I was talking about. This is a very, very important point. These are the things that the Edenist Hindutvadis, who say it was all great until the British screwed things up, or the crazy commies who say everything was bad before British, everything is bad after the British, everything was bad even during the British. Listen to what he's saying. That is not to say that the barbarian will always be considered socially inferior to the accepted impure caste. His social status depends upon his style of life. Okay? Even a barbarian might end up having a socially superior life than an accepted impure caste. And think of what can be an example for this. Okay? Let's say in a mofussil town of India, any mofussil town of India, a 25-year-old, 30-year-old guy, okay, maybe he does some he works in a local, let's say, tea shop, or works as a mm, or works as a, let's say, like tech bro, okay, has some job, okay, or even if he doesn't have a job, he just has a local kirana shop, okay. The kind of respect that guy has, whose family has been living there, let's say, for 5-6 generations in any official town, imagine the kind of social status he has in that neighborhood, okay, in that mohalla, versus uh, a struggling musician in Bombay, okay, who is earning 2-3 times more than that guy, but lives in a chawl in Mumbai. Okay, that's what we are talking about here. The census report of 1901 states that tribes outside the caste system enjoy greater esteem than do the lower castes of impure village artisans, precisely because they are not conquered subjects. Now, this is what Desai Deepak mentioned many, I think about 1 or 2 years earlier, that we used to have the concept of Nagara and grama. People who did want to live in the Nagara or wanted to live in the grama were the ones who subscribed to the four Varnas. The Panchamas, who wanted to live in the tribes, who were left alone, when many people who didn't even want to live in the Nagara and grama didn't want to subscribe to the four Varnas, even they went back to the forests, okay, because back then there was not too much of a significant difference in the standard of living between a forest dweller and a grama dweller, right? Today a forest dweller will have to live in a, like, a wooden tree house or something, get bitten by mosquitoes and stuff, okay, and the guy in the city is driving a Tesla. Back then it's not the case. The difference is much lesser, right? So in such a situation, he's saying the so-called panchamas, the outcasts, okay, tribes outside the caste system enjoy greater esteem. The esteem word is also very important, than do the lower castes of impure village artisans, precisely because they are not conquered subjects. If they were to affiliate with castes, they would be received by the pure castes. This is obviously similar to the relative social estimation of Indians, and meaning Red Indians, Native Americans, and Negroes in the United States. The higher esteem of the Native Americans is in the last analysis due to the fact that, quote unquote, they didn't submit to slavery. Therefore, the American gentleman permits intermarriage and commensalism with Indians, but never with Negroes. Imagine this situation today as well, okay? So let's say the struggling musician in the chawl, okay, or struggling model, okay, he has to deal with all sorts of gundas, uh, giving extortion money to this guy and that guy. He has to sit with outside producer's office, director's office, days after days, hours after hours, waits outside the office. No one gives a shit about him. Whereas that same producer or same director, if he uh, if he comes to, let's say, a local neighborhood in a official town to do a shooting, maybe that local guy who probably runs a kirana corner is a respected guy in the neighborhood. He will probably invite the director to his home for a cup of tea, and the director will happily go there and have a nice relationship with him, okay, but not with that struggling musician in the chawl in Mumbai. because he has bought into, in a way of, in a situation, in a that I am inferior to you, I'm waiting for a job from you, although he definitely earns more than the kirana shop owner in the mafiosil already. Starjack is saying Marxist be like Max Miller was actually RSS member, not Max Miller, Max Weber. Alberuni was a Sanghi because he was doing Sanghi propaganda before. Yes, that is what Savarkar said. You can marry Muslims in your bullock cart, but not a low-caste Hindu. Then we invented cancel culture. Yes. Okay. Therefore, yeah, Negroes in areas where the caste system has not been shattered, a non-Hindu, a European, for instance, can find only members of impure castes for domestic service. The domestic servant of the ritually pure Hindu castes, without exception, belongs to and must belong to pure caste. And this is what something has been going on in my mind since yesterday, because yesterday and today I ordered something from Swiggy, and both times it was a young Brahmin guy who came to deliver my food. And this is why we keep on saying free markets destroy caste-based bad behavior. Now here I am, a Shaha, technically a Teli caste, let's say, at least a third Varna, hiring that guy to deliver my food. Thus, with some qualifications, the principle holds that anyone not born a Hindu remains an outsider. And although, as has been indicated, there are open door castes, they are unclean. Ecclesiastical institutions of universal grace employ excommunication, okay, kicking out, for certain sacrilegious offenses, but only to the extent that the banned person forgoes churchly means of grace while remaining subject to ecclesiastical jurisdiction and sanction. Okay, he's not killed off. Shatrapavan is saying true. Even in ancient times, Nishadas had a somewhat higher status than some of the Shudras. Nishada royal that at times treated as right, exactly. Hinduism, however, is exclusive, like a sect. For certain religious offenses, a person is forever excluded from the community. A Brahman caste, for instance, cancelled the readmission of members after their forced conversion to Islamism. It did this despite their absolution by penance and purification when it became known that the applicants had been compelled to eat beef. So this is a ongoing debate that ghar wapsi possible hai ki nahi. Okay. This case is comparable to that of the heroic sects of early Christendom, including the Montanists, who, because of Matthew 10:3, in contrast to the corporate church organization, deemed absolutely irreparable the participation of Christians in emperor worship. Why will you worship an emperor? It was for this very reason that the Romans had made emperor worship compulsory during the time of the Diocletian persecutions. Insofar as individual recruitment was possible, at least the expelled Brahmins might have found a haven among one of the unclean castes of beef eaters. But a man who has knowingly killed a cow could not possibly be accepted as a fellow Hindu. To put it more precisely, the castes suspected with good reason of cooperating in cattle poisoning practices, especially the career castes, practices are an abomination for every Hindu, even though these castes are officially correct. Next subchapter begins. It's called Diffusion Patterns of Hinduism. What caste is Julia Roberts? Yes, they don't follow the orthodox Varna Jati system. If she, in the ancient system, in the ancient sense, she would be a Shudra because she's an entertainer. Jesus loves you, he's the only one. Cheers to that. Shankaracharya Vidyaranya Swami did Shuddhi of Harihara Bukkaraya. Yeah. I support Gharvapsi, yes. And Shudra kings oppressed Brahmins. Right. Okay. What's the time? Yeah. Okay. Hindu propaganda in the grand manner occurred in the past. It is still of considerable importance. In the course of about 800 years, the present Hindu system has spread from a small region in northern India to an area comprising over 200 million people. Fair enough. He's not even saying Aryan invasion theory. This missionary, of course, back then everyone believed in Aryan invasion theory, so if he does believe that, it would not surprise me. This missionary propaganda was accomplished in opposition to quote-unquote animistic folk belief and in conflict with highly developed salvation religions. The system is still expanding from census to census. Ordinarily, the propagation of Hinduism occurs in approximately the following way. Interesting. Let's see. How does Max Weber think propagation of Hinduism happens? The ruling stratum of an quote-unquote animistic tribal territory begins to imitate specific Hindu customs in something like the following order: abstention from meat, particularly beef, the absolute refusal to butcher cows, total abstinence from intoxicating drinks. To these, certain other specific purification practices of good Hindu castes may be added. The ruling stratum gives up marriage practices that may deviate from Hindu custom and organize itself into exogamous sibs, forbidding the marriage of their daughters to men of socially inferior strata, status. The Brahmins, by the way, are often very tolerant with regard to marital customs. So the process of Sanskritization, that the process of sewing this cloth, creating this coherent, this cohesive kind of diverse but kind of let's say homogeneous society of this Hindu civilization. Okay, Brahmins, by the way, are often very tolerant with regard to marital customs. During the Hinduization or the Sanskritization, I guess would be the same thing. During the Hinduization of many a small region, for instance, existing matrilineal lines were left in peace. So Hindu patriarchal Brahmins left matrilineal lines in peace. Moreover, some castes maintaining high standards have survivals of totemic organization, as will be shown. The same tolerance is shown for alcohol and food other than beef. In this respect, individual members of gentile castes, such as the Vishnuites and the Shivists, often differ more markedly than do the castes. So the distinction is not between castes, distinction is between these sampradayas. The assumption of additional Hindu customs follows rapidly. Restrictions are placed upon contact and table community. Widows are forced into celibacy. Daughters are given into marriage before puberty without being asked. The dead are cremated rather than buried. Ancestral death sacrifices or shraddha are arranged. And native deities are rebaptized with the names of Hindu gods and goddesses. Finally, tribal priests are eliminated and some Brahman is requested to provide and take charge of ritual concerns and thereby also to convince himself and provide testimony to the fact that they, the rulers of the tribe, were of ancient, only temporarily forgotten knightly Kshatriya blood. Okay? कुछ दिनों के लिए हम क्षत्रिय नहीं थे, मगर उससे पहले भी हम क्षत्रिय थे, and then the fake genealogies come up again. Of course, the let's say the pre-Brahminical or the pre-Sanskritized tribal priest, what would he do? Would he go jobless from then on? No. He would take up those same professions. He would learn those customs, how to do it in this way. But this was a process of integration without asking the other person to quit your way of life. And definitely without genocides. Or under favorable circumstances, the tribal priests borrow the Brahman's way of life. What did I just say? Even without reading that next sentence. I hadn't gotten into this part, okay, before starting the live stream. This is common sense. So in effect, Ambedkar is imposing the Varna concept in stories which were before the mentioning of the Varna in the Rig Veda, according to the chronology of the mandalas. Brahminical patriarchy. In many places, tribal priests were incorporated as Bhagats. Exactly. Kshatriyas meant members of army, not the rulers, right? There were many Shudra kings. Okay, Jesus went to India to learn philosophy and his tomb is in Kashmir. I'm not saying that, I'm reading a comment, okay. Listen to this line again. Under favorable circumstances, the tribal priests borrow the Brahman's way of life, acquire some knowledge of the Vedas, and maintain that they are themselves Brahmans of some special Veda school and members of an ancient, well-known Brahman Sib or Gotra going back to such and such sage Rishi. They make up their own genealogy, own sect, own Rishi, own Gotra, everything. And no one kills them for it. Presumably, it had only been forgotten that they had immigrated from an ancient Hindu region centuries ago. हम भूल गए थे, अब हमको याद आ गया है कि हम तो पहले हिंदू ही थे. So it's all about social incentives. At that moment, this was the incentive structure. What insanity have we been taught? Now they seek to establish relations with recognized Indian Brahmins. That is the story they would spin. It is not always easy to find true Brahmins ready to accept such spurious propositions, and neither in the past nor nowadays would a high caste Brahman accept them, even though they are the ones going and talking to these people and sanctioning these things. However, numerous Brahman subcastes were and are still to be found. Some of recognized Brahman quality are considered socially degraded because they serve lower castes, perhaps meat eaters and wine drinkers. They were and are ready to accept such propositions. Pedigree and the required origin myth The fake genealogies, possibly reached back to epic or pre epic times, are borrowed or simply invented, documented, and witnessed, permitting the claim to the rank of Rajput, royal relationship, the present day term for Kshatriya. Fleet, a scholar, proved the frequent falsification of princely pedigrees in southern India as early as the 9th century. Surviving irregularities in conduct are then eliminated, and a scanty Vedic education is required of the knights and of the stratum to be considered twice born freemen, Vaishyas. Assimilation is completed with the ceremony of girdling and binding themselves with holy ties. The ritual rites and duties of the various occupations are regulated in Hindu manner. So this is a nuance that commies don't seem to get. That yes, some Brahmins of, let's say, higher varna, higher status Brahmins had a problem with these things. They never opposed. They were always reluctantly accepting these things. That is all we want. Do you want people? Do you want a society to not even have any reluctance? Do you want a society to not have any rejection? Do you want a society to have no skepticism to any outsider? But that skepticism also should not lead you to becoming a person who kills outsiders. This is the best of both worlds, guys. Be skeptic. I don't like you. Okay, chalo, you are doing such great things. Okay, one generation later, they are basically the same now. That this accomplished the ruling stratum. The ruling stratum seeks social intercourse on equal footing with equivalent strata in ancient Hindu territory. So God is saying, Dada, so the moral is we must reclaim our temples and build our own community, which might lead to people converting back. My hunch is that there might be one problem with your sentence construction here, because today community means something different. Jatis were guilds who were in different positions in the hierarchy of the society, in different status groups, right? So you can't pretend to like that if you are in a situation of capitalism. Okay, only places who are able to follow those customs are places where the free market has not entered. If the free market enters, then the Brahmin Swiggy boy delivers food to everyone else. Okay, so if at all you want to really you are hard and fast about, no, I want to keep up the tradition of jati and varna, think of your solidarity with your in the people in your professional field. Okay, that it not doesn't have to be necessarily a evil union, but at least every musician stands up for every musician. Okay, every musician has a good relationship, which is also kind of inevitable, which already kind of happens in the industry. So every musician, let's say, loans money to a musician if he is not getting some work. Okay, that kind of a situation, that is inevitable. See, most principles of Sanatan Dharma, okay, or Hinduism are fucking inevitable. They always happen everywhere, anyway, regardless of what the state wants or does not want. Okay, so if you want to follow it like a theory, this is what you should do. The ancient jatis are done now because they were based on guilds. Why will you now base them on something other than professional guilds? Because that would be like a fancy dress competition. You have to come across as the ancient Hindu guy. You are going to be play acting like a guy living in 300 BC. It's not an evil thing to do, but I think it's not a battle worth picking. Just rolling and relaxing, Saugard. Okay. No, the model is create more ISKCON-like organization from Tad Mutts and Go expansion made. This is the, yeah. Bhai, I am lower caste Hindu. I have faced more discrimination from people who belong to even lower caste than me. ISKCON is an, okay. Okay, I'll get back to the book now. So this accomplished, the ruling stratum seeks social intercourse on equal footing with equivalent strata in ancient Hindu history. Yeah, this exactly reminds me what I was going to say anyway. Okay, so what I'm saying is that imagine musician is a jati. So composers, arrangers in Bollywood. Okay, there is jati hierarchies inside the community or guild called musician also. Okay, composers are friends with composers. They go to the same parties, hang out, are friends with their family members, are friends with each other, etc. Okay, but the arrangers are not, because they are kind of in a lower status than the composers, because the composer is the guy whose name is in the film posters always. Music, A.R. Rahman, Vishal and Shekhar. You don't know who did the programming, arrangement, assisting, who played guitar, everything in A.R. Rahman's song. Okay, so Arrangers are friends with other arrangers. Sound engineers, mix engineers, they are friends with other mix engineers. Now, this I'm talking about in, let's say, the in the core of the heart of the industry, whether be it Bollywood or Tollywood. Okay, so let's say Vishal and Shekhar will be friends with Amit Trivedi. Amit Trivedi's arranger might be friends with Vishal and Shekhar's arranger. Okay, but on the other hand, let's say in my scenario, I'm not a full-time film arranger at the moment, right? So I'm friends with arrangers who are also in my similar social stature. Okay, so even inside the musician varna or jati or caste, there are these kinds of groupings, and we are friends with each other. These things are inevitable. So drummers are like that's in Karan Johar is when possible, they seek to attain intermarriage and commensalism with its Rajput sibs, acceptance of food cooked in water from Brahmins, admission of their own Brahmins to old Brahmanical schools and cloisters. But this is extremely difficult and, as a rule, does not initially succeed. A true, or today presumably true, Brahman or Rajput will listen sympathetically and with good humor to the origin legend of such an upstart Rajput stratum, if, for example, an interested European relates it. No true Brahman or Rajput would dream of treating the new fellow as his peers. Alas, time and wealth make a difference. क्या बात बोल दिया. Alas, time and wealth make a difference. Large dowries to Rajputs who marry their daughters and other means of exerting social pressure are employed, and there comes a time today, often relatively quickly, when the manner of origin is forgotten and social acceptance is completed. A certain residue of rank degradation, okay, usually remains the lasting burden of the parvenu, the new rich, okay, new rich. No, at this point of Kaliug, just label old jati as tribe and move on. There, in substance, is the typical way in which Hinduism has been extensively propagated in new territories since its full development. This extensive propaganda was paralleled by an intensive propaganda which followed similar principles wherever Hinduism held sway. As a social phenomenon, quote unquote guest peoples existed everywhere within the Hindu community. Okay, now a gigantic footnote, okay? Weber's terms guest or pariah peoples refers to a series of groups in diverse constellations. The groups seem to be marked by the following typological extremes. 1. People who, as a result of invasion and conquest, are expropriated from their lands by immigrant caste groups and reduced to economic dependence on the conqueror. Bhata. From the standpoint of the conqueror, such people are guests, quote unquote guests, even though they are older settlers than the conquerors. As soon as the caste system is established, the newcomers may begin to assimilate the quote unquote barbarians or the original settlers by assigning them to the lowest of the castes. Peoples who have lost their homelands completely and turned into itinerant artisans like the gypsies live a dispersed, migratory, dependent existence. Jajabod. Obviously, both of this is still the footnote I'm reading, okay? Obviously, both of these groups find themselves in situations which have come to be described as quote unquote marginal by Stonequist. In the book called Contemporary Social Theory, edition by Harry E. Barnes, Howard Becker, and Francis B. Becker, New York. Okay. On occasion, following general usage, we employ the term marginal trading peoples for trading guests. Okay, those quote unquote guests. Weber's frequent comparative references to the Jains, whom he calls Jains, are called Jews of the Far East by Max Weber, and to the Jews of the Occidental Middle Ages. Okay. No, they are Jains are not called Jews of the Far East. Okay, I misunderstood it because of the sentence construction. Okay, he's talking about all of these people. Weber's frequent comparative references to the Jains, the Jews of the Far East, and to the Jews of the Occidental Middle Ages seems evidence for the soundness of this procedure. Okay, now let's get to the text. So, as a social phenomenon, guest peoples existed everywhere within the Hindu community. They are to be found to this day. Contemporary remnants still evident among us are the gypsies, a typical ancient Indian guest people, which in contrast to the others has wandered outside of India. In earlier times, similar phenomena occurred on a far larger scale in India. There, as elsewhere, the guest people does not primarily appear as an absolutely homeless wandering people. So, bhai, even Max Weber knew gypsies are people who went out of Rajasthan and Gujarat. Their language is like that, their dresses like that. They have a dharma chakra on their flag. Their song, their national anthem, are full of words that I can understand even as a Bengali. Okay, their national anthem is called Gelem Gelem. Okay, Bengalis will know. So More even, but we were not taught those things. Max Weber knew those things. More frequently, the guest peoples are of tribes which still possess village settlements of their own. Okay? Guest peoples are of tribes which still possess village settlements of their own, but dispose of the product of their household or tribal industry interlocally, or of tribes where the members may periodically lease their services interlocally as harvesters, day laborers, repairmen, hired helpers, or finally, of tribes which may traditionally monopolize interlocal trade in a special product. ये तो है गिल्ड, उसके लिए अल्टीमेटली मोनोपोली वगैरह तो होगा. तो मोनोपोली का एडवांटेज है कि एक वो एक्सपर्टीज का बात तो है कि ऑल ऑफ दीज पीपल हु नो ईच अदर आर ओवर जनरेशंस are doing this one particular craft, so they might be insane at their job versus someone taking up that job in their first generation. But then there is the problem that they can demand any salary, okay, or they might get complacent that काम तो हमको ही मिलना है, अब चलो घटिया बास्केट बना के दे देते हैं. So no solution is a one solution for everything, right? Guys, focus on the reading. Let him keep barking. He is helping the channel. Okay. Of tribes which may traditionally monopolize interlocate. Okay. The increase in population of wood and mountain barbarian tribes on one hand, and the increasing demand for labor in the developing culture areas on the other hand, created with increasing wealth numerous lower or unclean services. When the local resident population declined to take them over, these occupations fell into the hands of alien workers of foreign origin who were permanently lodged in urban areas but retained their tribal affiliations. Guest industry became highly developed in a form resembling that of specialized communities. Certain high-skilled trades are found in the hands of men native to the region, but such men were viewed as outsiders by village peoples. Kya confusing hai. They did not live in the village but on the outskirts, in German on the Wurth. They shared no part in the rights of the villagers, but rather formed into interlocal organizations of their own, which answered for them and had jurisdiction over them. Kind of the things that Koshi Gangopadhyay was saying yesterday. That this is how guilds don't have to necessarily become the evil union by the kind of things. Okay. In the village, and this is how this is the same thing that we learned from Dirks's book or Declan Quigley's only the earlier papers that we discussed, the idea of little kings. Okay, it's not like there's one king जिसके ऊपर एक ब्राह्मण बैठा है, ये दोनों मिलके पूरा देश चला रहे हैं. There are little kings, there are little Brahmins, little priests. Okay, jurisdiction over them. So in the village, they had only guest rights, partially under religious, partially under princely guarantee. Such phenomena are also found outside of India. Okay, what's the time? 10:05. Let's see how big is this subchapter. So this is a pretty big subchapter. I won't be able to finish it anyway. So I'll end the live stream now here. So I'll obviously discuss this book later on from this live my channel only. So as you can see, the conclusion of this, the takeaway of this live stream is that what an amazing scholar Max Weber was, and maybe he will say some things wrong. 1916 ka data, British data. But just because he said too many good things about Hinduism or Indian society, he has been eliminated from mainstream academia. And just because he has said some things that go against the narrative of Edenist Hindutvadis, he has also been ignored by basically the non-left of India as well. So this is why I named this live stream Hindutva 2.0. Okay, let's not be kids about this. Let's not have weak sissy hearts and minds. Let's know things for what they are and keep the fight anyway. Okay. And like I said a few days back in a Twitter conversation with somebody, like you all know who watched my conversation with Rebecca Barsef, that I basically screwed up big time while discussing Ramayana, Mahabharata and stuff. And every one of you who have been following my channel for more than 5 months know that I know almost nothing of those texts. Okay. But the misconception is that whether I need to know those texts or not. And there I disagree. I say I do not need to know those texts, because one argument is that if you don't know those texts, how will you debate with someone trying to hate those texts? So my point is, those texts are not up for debate, bhai. Ye samjho. At best, those texts can be debated by well-meaning people who have reverence for those texts on both sides. Kushal Mehra and Ami Ganatra can debate. Okay. There can be debates between the Gita Press people and the Ramakrishna Mission press people or the ISKCON press people. But a person who is saying Hinduism is bad, usko mujhe samjhana hi nahi hai. Because his argument is that some bad thing was written in some text, therefore now convert to my religion. ये क्या चूतिया लॉजिक है भाई? Or there is some bad thing written in some text, therefore now you deserve to face genocide. ये चूतिया आर्ग्यूमेंट से नहीं होगा. So what I was saying on Twitter is that I don't give a shit if you can even show me puppy torture in Ramayana, okay? You show me that somewhere Ram went to a forest and एक गला घोट दिया एक puppy का, okay? I don't give a shit. Because first of all, राम जी ने पपी टॉर्चर किया है इसलिए आज तुम मुझे मार दोगे, ये भोसरी का आर्ग्यूमेंट है. पहली बात तो ये है. सेकेंड पॉइंट इज दैट द सोसाइटी हैज लार्जली नॉट एक्सेप्टेड दैट और हैज मूव्ड ऑन फ्रॉम दैट और हैज कंसिडर्ड दैट टू बी अ मिसइंटरप्रिटेशन एंड देयरफॉर प्रोबेबली एंड्स अप कर्लिंग अ पपी. कि नहीं, एक्चुअली व्हाट वाज मेंट वाज दैट लॉर्ड राम वांटेड टू से दैट पपी देखो तो उसका थोड़ा मतलब उसको थोड़ा आदर करो, गला मत घोट दो. तो व्हाट इज रिटन इन द टेक्स्ट हैज नो रेलेवेंस on the Hindutva side, because Hindutva is political Hinduism. I am not a theologian. I don't intend to be a theologian. I don't intend to start my own ashram. And therefore, I don't really need to know Ramayana and Mahabharata by heart. Okay? Thank you guys. Good night. See you soon. On Sunday, we will probably have an economist called Sudipto Guho, a Bengali free market guy. Thank you guys. Good night. Bye-bye.
श्रवरूढं महाभीमं गुणाद्रष्टाङ्गरप्रदम् अस्य युक्तं त्रिनेत्रं च कपालकर्णिकाकरान् मुक्तकेशिं ललज्जयं पिबन्तीं रुधिरं चतुर्बाहु समायुक्तं वराभयकरं स्मरेत्. चतुर्बाहु समायुक्तं वराभयकरं स्मरेत्. काली काली महाकाली कालिके पापहारिणी धर्मर्थ मोक्षदे देवी नारायणी नमोस्तुते. धर्मर्थ मोक्षदे देवी नारायणी नमोस्तुते. काली काली